you, in a sense, moved away from Latin America.
Yeah, I really, partly because of the split within the Montoneros over the question of the return, which was quite painful because we had a whole group of people in London who were linked to that movement, and that movement split, including people who went back to the return and felt that Gelman and Galimberti and others, that we were the traitors to the cause, whereas we felt they were the traitors to the cause. And I really decided that I had no part in it, that I no longer wished to be involved. And I think the war in the South Atlantic reinforced that. A war between two bald men fighting over a comb, as I think Borges put it, quite accurately. And I just decided to do something else. I left Latin American newsletters in 1982. I started a whole new business, publishing computer software for schools and writing about the sort of emergence of microcomputers into everyone's consciousness.
But you went back to Latin America recently. What were the changes you saw then?
I returned to Latin America for the first time in 2002 and went back 3 or 4 times in the subsequent 4 or 5 years. Well, I think most of what appears in the British press about Latin America is about disasters. It's about earthquakes, repression, drug wars, anything bad makes it to the press. And yes, all those things happen, but it's rather as if we covered America by saying 2,000 people were killed on American roads last month. Well, yes, and next month as well. At the same time, all sorts of other things have been happening in Latin America. There's been a huge expansion of the middle class, and you may say that hasn't had, that this is unsustainable, that there have been destructions of rainforest in Brazil, and but enormous wealth creation which has affected everybody in Latin America. And this gives a very, very different picture than the one, as I say, which we're generally fed. So that although Lima, for example, when I left Lima when I worked there, and I left it in 1968, it had 1.5 million people. It now has 10 million people in it. The emergence of mega cities over the last 40 years.
But also the state of the slums has changed.
Yeah, but you see, I think they were changing even then. I think they were expressions of economic development, they weren't the sink cities that of sort of popular imagination. They were
like the New York tenements.
Yeah, they were. And of course, films like The City of God, where everyone is killing each other, gives not a totally false picture, but only one tiny aspect of what happens, and why violence is appearing in one piece of the city and not in another, and where you have new political forces and mayors who suddenly become popular leaders, and even something like Chavez. Oh my God, he's closing down all the newspapers, and that is true. There are really bad things you can say about Chavez, but at the same time, rather like Peron, he has this enormous popular following because he actually has done something for the bottom 10, 15, 20%, which was never done by the democratically elected bourgeois governments that preceded him. Acción Democrática had every chance to win the support of those sectors of society, and quite deliberately chose not to.
Yes. But you were also talking about the rise of evangelical Christianity.
Which again is very interesting, I think, and possibly one of the most visible social changes has been the emergence of evangelical Protestantism at every class level. This is in the little villages in the Andes, but it's also in the middle-class suburbs of Lima.
And taking over from Catholicism, which was the sort of...
Catholicism was always was a very conservative force, except among the liberation priests in Brazil and Guatemala, largely repressed by Pope John Paul, so that the Catholic Church had reverted to being a very reactionary force in Latin America through Opus Dei and the like. And although the Protestants are not socially or politically progressive, they are, in terms of capital formation and encouraging capitalism at a base level. They're not linked to the old ruling class. They are encouraging their flock to go out and make money and give 10% to the pastor.
Yes.
This is having a huge...
And it's creating social mobility at some level.
It's enabling social mobility.
Yes.
At many, many different levels. And this is changing the nature of politics and of capitalism in Latin America. And if you look, I mean, this is nowhere more visible than in Brazil, which is a totally different place. The success of Brazilian protectionism towards its own industry, towards the computer industry, towards the aircraft manufacturing industry, has been a tremendously successful tactic. And the fact that Lula could be elected, have 2 successful terms as president, be succeeded by his nominee, and nobody is saying that those elections were stolen or faked. This is a huge success, and one that is still working itself out.
Christopher, thanks for talking to me today.